bedroom, the room in my son's house where I'd been living for 3 years, and hearing him say with such coldness, such contempt, "Mom, pack your bags. You're moving out today. You have 1 hour. My wife has already found a nursing home that will take you, and the van is coming to pick you up at noon." I looked at the clock. It was 11 a.m. 1 hour. He was giving me 1 hour to pack up my life and leave. Like I was trash being taken to the curb. Like 3 years of helping raise his children, cooking his meals, cleaning his house, being available whenever he needed me meant absolutely nothing. But here's what I want you to think about. What would you do if your own child, the person you gave life to, told you that you had 1 hour to leave their home? Would you beg? Would you cry? Would you pack your bags and accept your fate? Or would you stand up for yourself, knowing that you'd already prepared for this moment? Already changed everything the day before? Already made sure that their cruelty would have consequences they never saw coming? If you want to know what happened when my son tried to throw me out like garbage, how his wife stood there smiling while he delivered the news, how I stayed completely calm because I'd already transferred the house deed the previous day, and what their faces looked like when they realized what I'd done, make sure you subscribe to this channel right now and hit that like button. Because this story is going to show you that underestimating elderly women is a dangerous game. And the twist that came exactly 1 hour after that ultimatum? Well, let's just say my son learned a very expensive lesson about respecting your mother. Let me back up and explain how I ended up living with my son Richard and his wife Diane in the first place. Because it's important to understand the full picture. To understand what I sacrificed and what I contributed and why what they did was so much more than just asking me to leave. It was a betrayal of everything we'd built together over 3 years. My husband Frank died 4 years ago. After his death, I'd been living alone in our family home. The house we'd raised our 3 children in. The house full of memories and love and 47 years of life together. I'd been managing okay. Managing my grief. Managing the house. Managing my life. But my son Richard had convinced me, had really pushed hard, to sell my house and move in with him and Diane. He said they needed help with the grandkids. Said I shouldn't be alone. Said it would be better for everyone if we all lived together. Like a fool, like a trusting mother who believed her son had her best interests at heart, I'd agreed. I sold my house, my beautiful home worth about $400,000. I gave Richard $200,000 of that money as what he called a contribution to the household. He said they'd need to renovate to make space for me. Said it would help with expenses. Said it was only fair since I'd be living there. I'd agreed because he made it sound reasonable. Made it sound like I was being included in the family. Being valued. Being needed. I'd kept the other $200,000 in savings in investments as my security. As my nest egg for emergencies. I'd moved into their house thinking this was my home now. Thinking I was part of their family. Thinking this arrangement would last for the rest of my life. Those 3 years I worked like a servant in that house. I was up every morning at 6 a.m. making breakfast for everyone. Getting the grandkids ready for school. Packing lunches. Driving them to activities. I cleaned the entire house top to bottom every week. Did everyone's laundry. Cooked dinner every single night. Diane worked from home but somehow was always too busy to help. Always had meetings or deadlines or stress. I'd taken on all the domestic labor. All the childcare. All the invisible work that keeps a household running. And I'd done it happily. Done it thinking I was helping my family. Thinking I was earning my place. Thinking I was valued for my contributions. But gradually I almost didn't notice it happening. The gratitude disappeared. The appreciation vanished. I became not a beloved mother and grandmother, but an employee. No, worse than an employee. Because employees get paid and get days off and get treated with basic respect. I got none of those things. I got demands and complaints and criticism. Diane started finding fault with everything I did. Saying I cooked too much salt or not enough. Saying I folded the laundry wrong. Saying I was spoiling the kids. Saying I was always in the way, always underfoot, always interfering. And Richard, my own son, he never defended me. Never stood up for me. Just nodded along with his wife's complaints and started treating me like a burden instead of his mother. About 6 months ago, things got really bad. Really tense. Diane stopped being polite even in front of the kids. Would snap at me. Would make comments about how much space I took up. How much food I ate. how expensive it was to have me there. I started to feel unwelcome, started to feel like I was being tolerated rather than welcomed, started to understand that something had changed, that the dynamics had shifted, that I was no longer seen as family, but as an inconvenience. I should have left then, should have packed my bags and found my own place. But I loved my grandchildren, loved being part of their daily lives, loved feeling needed even if I wasn't appreciated. And I stayed. I stayed hoping things would get better, hoping Diane would remember I was a person with feelings, hoping Richard would remember I was his mother who'd raised him with love. I was wrong to hope, so wrong, because what was actually happening was they were planning, plotting, deciding that they wanted me gone and figuring out how to make that happen without looking like the villains. The morning Richard told me to pack my bags started like any other morning. I'd made breakfast for everyone, gotten the kids off to school, cleaned up the kitchen. I was folding laundry in my room when Richard and Diane came in together. They came in with these serious faces, these determined expressions. I knew immediately that something was wrong. Something bad was about to happen. Richard didn't ease into it, didn't try to soften the blow. He just said, "Mom, we need to talk. Diane and I have decided that this living arrangement isn't working anymore. You're moving out today. We've arranged a spot for you at Sunset Valley Nursing Home. They have an opening and you need to be there by this afternoon. So start packing. You have 1 hour." I just stared at him, stared at my son, trying to process what he'd just said, trying to understand how we'd gone from me living here as family to being evicted with 1 hour's notice. I said, "Richard, what are you talking about? What do you mean I'm moving out today? I live here. This is my home. You can't just throw me out with an hour's notice." Diane, she actually laughed, actually had this cruel smile on her face. She said, "This isn't your home. This is our house. You're a guest who's overstayed her welcome. Frankly, you're too much work. Too much drama. Too expensive to keep around. We need our space back. We need our lives back. We need to be a family again without you constantly being in the middle of everything." I looked at Richard, looked at my son, waiting for him to contradict her, waiting for him to say she'd gone too far. But he just nodded, just agreed with every cruel word. He said, "She's right, Mom. You've become a burden. We can't do this anymore. The nursing home is nice. They have activities and nurses. You'll have people your own age around. It's better for everyone. And honestly, we should have done this months ago." The way he said burden, the way he dismissed 3 years of my labor, my love, my presence in his children's lives. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. That hurt worse than anything Diane had said. Because this was my son. My child. The boy I'd raised to be kind and compassionate and loyal. And he was standing there treating me like trash to be disposed of. I said very quietly, "What about the $200,000 I gave you? What about all the work I've done around here for 3 years? What about your children who love me, who depend on me? You're just going to rip me away from them with no warning? No transition? No chance to say goodbye?" Diane actually rolled her eyes, actually looked annoyed that I was bringing up money. She said, "That $200,000 was your contribution to living here. You got 3 years of free rent and food in exchange. We're more than even. As for the kids, they'll adjust. They're resilient. Frankly, it'll be better for them not to be so attached to you. You won't be around forever anyway. Better they learn that now." She said you won't be around forever, like she was hoping I'd die soon. Like I was some inconvenient obligation that death would eventually remove. I looked at Richard again. One more time. Giving him one more chance to be the man I'd raised. The son I'd believed in. He said nothing. Just looked uncomfortable and checked his watch. "It's 11:15, he said. "You have 45 minutes. The van will be here at noon. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." I stood there for a moment. Just stood there looking at them both. These two people who'd used me. Who'd taken my money and my labor and my love and were now discarding me like I meant nothing. I felt something inside me shift. Felt the hurt and betrayal transform into something colder. Something harder. Something that saw clearly for the first time in 3 years. I said very calmly, very quietly, "You know what? You're absolutely right. I should leave. I should have left a long time ago. I'll pack my bags. Diane looked relieved. Looked victorious. Like she'd won something. Richard looked guilty but determined. They left my room. Left me standing there. I heard Diane in the hallway saying to Richard, "See? I told you it would be easy. Old people are so passive. They just accept whatever you tell them." I smiled. Actually smiled. Because they had no idea. Absolutely no idea what I'd done the day before. What I'd already set in motion. What was about to hit them like a freight train. You see, I'm old, but I'm not stupid. I'd seen this coming. Not the exact timeline, but the general direction. I'd felt the hostility building. Felt the resentment growing. Felt them pulling away and treating me worse and worse. About a month ago, I'd started preparing. Started documenting everything. Started taking photographs. Started keeping records. And yesterday, just yesterday, less than 24 hours before Richard told me to pack my bags, I'd gone to see a lawyer. A very good lawyer who specialized in elder law. I told him everything. Shown him everything. And we'd made some changes. Some very significant changes that Richard and Diane were about to discover. The timing was almost too perfect. Like the universe was helping me. Giving me one last chance to stand up for myself. To fight back. To show them that you don't treat your mother like garbage without consequences. Let me explain what I'd done yesterday. What Richard and Diane had no idea about. What was about to change everything. The story I told you earlier about selling my house and giving Richard $200,000, that was true. But what I hadn't told Richard, what I'd kept secret for 3 years, was that my house hadn't been in just my name. It had been in a family trust that Frank and I had set up years ago. A trust that included not just that property but several other properties. Investments. Accounts. A portfolio worth approximately $3 million. And I was the sole trustee. The sole controller. The sole decision-maker about where those assets went. Richard had always assumed I was just a retired teacher with a small pension. Had no idea about the wealth his father and I had accumulated. Had no idea that the $200,000 I'd given him was a tiny fraction of what I actually controlled. I kept it that way deliberately. Kept it secret because I wanted to see how he'd treat me when he thought I had nothing left to give. Wanted to see if his love was real or conditional. Well, now I knew. Now I had my answer. Yesterday, I'd met with my attorney Gerald Morrison, and I'd done several things. Several very important things. First, I'd removed Richard as a beneficiary from the trust. Removed him completely. Meaning that when I died, he'd get nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not a penny of the $3 million he didn't even know existed. Second, I'd added my other 2 children, my daughter Sarah and my younger son Michael, as equal beneficiaries. They'd split everything. I'd done this because unlike Richard, they'd stayed in touch. They'd called regularly. They'd visited when they could. They'd shown actual love and concern even though they lived far away. They deserved to be rewarded for that. But that wasn't the most important thing I'd done. The most devastating change. The one that would hit Richard and Diane immediately, not years from now when I died. That was the property transfer. You see, the house they were living in, the house they thought was theirs, the house they were throwing me out of, that house was actually mine. I'd bought it for them 5 years ago when they were struggling financially. Bought it outright with trust money. But I'd kept the deed in the trust name. Kept legal ownership. They'd never bothered to check. Never bothered to verify. Just assumed it was theirs because they lived there and made the decisions and paid the utilities. But there was no mortgage. Because I owned it. And yesterday I transferred that house. Transferred the deed out of the trust and into Sarah's name. My daughter's name. Made Sarah the legal owner. Effective immediately. Recorded it with the county. Made it official and irreversible. This meant Richard and Diane were now essentially tenants in Sarah's house. They had no ownership. No equity. No rights except whatever Sarah decided to give them. Sarah. I'd already called her yesterday. Explained the situation. Told her what Richard was doing. How he was treating me. She'd been furious. Absolutely furious. Mom, how could he do this to you? After everything you've done for him. She'd agreed to the transfer. Agreed that she'd handle the property as she saw fit. I knew Sarah. Knew she was fair but firm. Knew she wouldn't let Richard and Diane stay in that house after what they'd done. Knew that justice was coming for them fast. I didn't actually pack my bags. Didn't throw clothes into suitcases like they expected. Instead, I sat down on my bed and I pulled out my phone. I called Gerald. Gerald, it's happening, I said. They just told me I have to leave in 1 hour. They're sending me to a nursing home. It's time to execute everything we discussed yesterday. Gerald said. Are you absolutely sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. The legal papers are filed. The transfers are recorded. Everything is already in motion from yesterday. But I can still stop it if you want to give them a chance. I said, no. No more chances. They've shown me exactly who they are. Proceed with everything. I want them to know exactly what they've lost. Exactly what their cruelty has cost them. At exactly 11:55 a.m., 5 minutes before noon, 5 minutes before the nursing home van was supposed to arrive, there was a knock at the door. I heard Diane answer it. Heard her say, "Oh, you must be from Sunset Valley. You're a bit early, but that's fine. We have her ready." Then I heard a man's voice say, "I'm not from Sunset Valley. I'm Gerald Morrison, Mrs. Patricia Henderson's attorney. I need to speak with Richard and Diane Henderson immediately regarding urgent legal matters." I heard the confusion in Diane's voice. Heard her call for Richard. Heard them both coming to the door. I walked out of my room. Walked calmly into the living room where I could see everything. Where I could watch this unfold. Gerald stood in the doorway in his expensive suit, holding his leather briefcase. He said, "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, I'm here to serve you with several legal documents and to inform you of significant changes regarding this property and Mrs. Patricia Henderson's estate." Richard looked confused. Looked at me. Looked at Gerald. "What are you talking about? What legal documents? Mom, what's going on?" I just smiled. Just stood there, calm and composed. "Well, Richard," I said, "since you've given me notice that I need to leave, I thought it was only fair to give you some notice too. Notice about your living situation. Notice about your future. Notice about all the things you assumed were true but actually weren't." Gerald opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. "First," he said, "regarding this property located at 847 Maple Street, as of yesterday at 3:47 p.m., the deed to this house was transferred from the Henderson Family Trust to Sarah Henderson, Mrs. Patricia Henderson's daughter. Sarah is now the legal owner of this property. You have no ownership stake, no equity, and you are currently residing in her property without a formal lease agreement." I watched their faces, watched the color drain, watched the confusion turn to shock, turn to horror. Diane said, "That's impossible. This is our house. We've lived here for 8 years. We own this house." Gerald said very calmly, very professionally, "No, ma'am. You've lived here for 8 years, but the property was purchased by Mrs. Patricia Henderson and held in trust. You never actually owned it. As trustee, she had full authority to transfer it, which she did, legally and properly. I have all the documentation here." Richard turned to me, his face red, his hands shaking. "Mom, what have you done? You can't do this. You can't just take our house." I said, still so calm, still so composed, "It was never your house, Richard. It was my house. I bought it for you. Like you live in it. And you've treated me like garbage. Thrown me out with 1 hour's notice. Called me a burden." I paused. "So yes, I can do this. I did do this. And now you know how it feels to lose your home with no warning. To have the rug pulled out from under you. To realize that the security you thought you had was actually dependent on someone else's generosity. Someone whose generosity you've completely exhausted." Diane was scrolling on her phone, frantically searching property records. She looked up with tears in her eyes. Angry tears, not sad tears. "This is elder abuse," she said. "This is you being manipulated by your other children. We're going to fight this. We're going to sue. We're going to prove you're not competent to make these decisions." Gerald actually laughed. Actually chuckled. "Mrs. Henderson," he said. "I've been Mrs. Patricia Henderson's attorney for 15 years. I can assure you she's completely competent. In fact, we anticipated that accusation, which is why she underwent a complete cognitive evaluation yesterday with Dr. Rebecca Chan, a court-recognized expert in elder care and mental capacity." He pulled out another document. "Dr. Chen's report, which I have here, concludes that Mrs. Henderson is fully competent, of sound mind, and capable of making all her own legal and financial decisions. So no, you won't be able to contest this on competency grounds. And I should warn you that any frivolous lawsuits will be met with countersuits for harassment and elder abuse. Gerald handed them more papers. Second, he continued, regarding the Henderson Family Trust, Mrs. Patricia Henderson has removed Richard Henderson as a beneficiary, effective immediately. He will receive no inheritance upon her death. The trust assets, valued at approximately $3 million, will be divided equally between Sarah Henderson and Michael Henderson, Mrs. Henderson's other two children. Watching Richard's face at that moment, watching him realize he just lost $3 million, watching him understand that the mother he'd thrown out like trash was actually wealthy, was actually the source of everything he'd thought was his, that was satisfying in a way I can't fully describe. It was justice. It was consequences. It was reality finally catching up to cruelty. Richard collapsed onto the couch. Actually collapsed like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. $3 million, he said. You have $3 million? And you've been living here like you needed us. Like you were dependent on us. I said, I never needed you, Richard. I wanted to be close to you. Wanted to be part of my grandchildren's lives. Wanted to believe that my son loved me enough to treat me with basic decency even when he thought I had nothing to offer him. I continued, but you failed that test. You failed spectacularly. And now you're learning that actions have consequences. That how you treat people matters. That you should never assume someone is powerless just because they're old and kind and generous. Diane was crying now. Real crying. Not angry tears but panic tears. Where are we supposed to go? She said. If Sarah owns this house and wants us out, where are we supposed to live? We can't afford to buy another house. We've been counting on this equity for our retirement. I felt nothing. Felt absolutely no sympathy. You know, Diane, that's a really good question, I said. Where will you go? Maybe you could find a nursing home. I hear Sunset Valley has openings. Or maybe you could move in with your mother. I paused. Oh wait. You haven't spoken to your mother in 5 years because you said she was too difficult. Too demanding. Too much work. Funny how that works, isn't it? Funny how the way you treat your parents comes back around eventually. Gerald finished serving the papers. Informed them that Sarah would be in touch regarding the property and their tenancy. Informed them that they had 30 days to either negotiate a lease with Sarah or vacate the premises. Then he turned to me. Mrs. Henderson, your bags are in my car. I took the liberty of packing your important documents and valuables yesterday when we met. You have a beautiful apartment waiting for you. Fully furnished, in that senior living community you toured last week. The one you fell in love with. You can move in today. Right now. No nursing home. No 1-hour deadlines. Just a fresh start in a place where you'll be respected and valued. I smiled. Actually felt joy for the first time in months. Thank you, Gerald, I said. Let's go. I walked toward the door. Walked past Richard, who was still sitting there stunned. Walked past Diane, who was crying. I didn't look back. Didn't say goodbye. Just left. Left them sitting in a house they just discovered wasn't theirs. Left them facing a future they'd never planned for. Left them to deal with the consequences of their cruelty. As we walked to Gerald's car, I heard the front door open behind me. Heard Richard's voice calling. Mom, wait. Please. We need to talk about this. We can work this out. Paused. Turned around. Richard, I said. You gave me 1 hour. Told me I was a burden. Told me to leave with no discussion, no negotiation, no consideration for my feelings or my contributions. So no, we don't need to talk. We don't need to work anything out. I continued. You made your decision and I've made mine. The difference is my decision has legal weight and yours was just cruelty. Goodbye, Richard. Tell your children I love them. Tell them their grandmother had to leave, but it wasn't her choice. Tell them the truth. If you're capable of that. I got in Gerald's car and we drove away. I watched in the side mirror as Richard stood in the driveway of a house that wasn't his anymore. Watching me leave, finally understanding what he'd lost. That was 6 months ago. I'm sitting here now in my beautiful apartment in a senior living community that's actually wonderful. Actually respectful. Actually treats elderly people like human beings with value and dignity. I have friends here. activities, independence, peace. I'm happier than I've been in years. Happier than I ever was in Richard's house. I know now that I made the right choice. The only choice. Because staying there, accepting that treatment, that would have killed me slowly. Would have destroyed my self-worth. Would have taught my grandchildren that it's acceptable to treat elderly people like burdens. I wasn't going to model that. Wasn't going to enable that. Wasn't going to sacrifice my dignity for proximity to grandchildren who were being raised by people who didn't value me. Sarah did evict Richard and Diane. Gave them 60 days instead of 30, because Sarah's kinder than I would have been. They had to move into a small rental apartment. Had to downsize dramatically. Had to face the reality of living within their actual means without my financial support propping them up. Richard has called me probably 50 times. Left voicemails apologizing. Begging for another chance. Asking me to reconsider the trust. I haven't called him back. Haven't engaged. Because some apologies come too late. Some damage can't be repaired. Some words can't be unsaid. You have 1 hour and you're a burden. Those are words that revealed his true character. And no amount of apologies can change what I now know about who my son really is. My grandchildren, I do see them occasionally. Sarah brings them to visit me. Coordinates with their school schedule. They're confused about why they don't live in the big house anymore. Why grandma doesn't live with them anymore. I've told them age-appropriate truth. Told them that sometimes adults make mistakes. That daddy and mommy weren't kind to grandma. That grandma had to leave to take care of herself. I genuinely hope, that this experience teaches them something. Teaches them to value their elders. Teaches them that how you treat people matters. Teaches them that consequences are real and cruelty has costs. The lesson here, the real lesson that took me 75 years to learn, is that you teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. I've been tolerating disrespect for 3 years. Accepting verbal abuse. Accepting being treated like hired help. Accepting being devalued and dismissed. By tolerating it, I was teaching Richard and Diane that it was acceptable. Was teaching my grandchildren that this was normal. The moment I stopped tolerating it, the moment I stood up for myself and used the power I had to demand better treatment, everything changed. Yes, I lost my relationship with my son. Lost daily contact with my grandchildren. But I gained something more important. I gained my self-respect back. Gained my dignity. Gained the knowledge that I'm worth more than how they treated me. That's priceless. That's worth more than any relationship built on my accepting abuse. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been in a situation where family took advantage of your kindness, where people assumed you were powerless because you were generous, where you had to make the hard choice between maintaining relationships and maintaining your dignity, please subscribe to this channel right now and hit that like button. I'll be sharing more stories about standing up for yourself. About using whatever power you have to demand respect. About learning that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who treat you poorly. I need your support to reach others who might be in similar situations. Who might need to hear that being old doesn't mean being powerless. That being kind doesn't mean being a doormat. That you have rights and value regardless of your age. So subscribe. Share this video. Help me build a community of people who believe that respect is non-negotiable, and that elder abuse in any form is unacceptable. Now here's my question for you. If you had the resources and the advance warning that I had, would you have fought back the way I did? Or would you have left quietly to avoid conflict? And why? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between family harmony and your own dignity? How did you handle it? Tell me your story in the comments. Tell me if you think I was right to transfer the house and change the trust. Tell me if you think I should eventually forgive Richard, or if some betrayals are unforgivable. Because your perspectives matter. Your experiences matter. And together we can figure out how to navigate these impossible situations where love and self-respect collide. Thank you for watching, dear ones. Thank you for supporting this channel. And remember, you are never too old to stand up for yourself. Never too dependent to demand respect. Never too powerless to fight back against people who underestimate you. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away from people who don't value you. Even when those people are your own children. Because you deserve better. You've always deserved better. Settling for less than respect is settling for a slow death of the spirit. I refuse to do that. I refuse to accept that treatment. And I hope my story gives you permission to refuse it too. To stand up. To fight back. To use whatever resources and power you have to create a life of dignity and peace. Because that's what you deserve. That's what we all deserve. And no one, absolutely no one, has the right to take that away from you. Until next time.